Hello again. Welcome to another speed roll Q&A kind of thing. Just to highlight what we'll be seeing on screen today, it is all the April Fool's artwork I've done, which includes Hitoshi Shinsou, Denki Kaminari, Venti from Genshin Impact, Satoru Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, and of course ending with Kirishima. So it has been quite a big long week for me, considering it was Easter, and I hope everyone else had a fantastic Easter themselves. But I realized how many questions I have to get through, including I think one question from the last video which I could only answer half of. So I will be starting with that one before moving on to everyone else. But it's gonna be extremely long. This is, by warning, I will say almost an hour-long video of me just answering questions from a track of everyone who's used hashtag MayIAsk, which actually has been very helpful. I've been able to locate questions a lot easier and also remember them quite well. But for now, I've actually had to write down my answers. I don't think I'd be able to answer them on the spot. So I do have a bit of a script, but that's because they were my first thoughts when I read the questions and then having to answer them for this video. So let's get a head start on things, shall we? So firstly, there's Miranda Murray's question from the last video, which I could only answer half of because I did run out of time and video editing space, unfortunately, to answer everything. But I'm going to go through each of their questions as they've written. So this is like the full answer for everything, and hopefully it answers a few things, not a lot. So just breaking down everything that's on screen, Miranda Murray had asked a fair few questions, so just to wrap up everything, the first question is in regards to Love's quirk about the body temperature dropping and whether it affects anybody, similar to Avatar, and just as reference, Love is Shouto Todoroki's traveler. The next question they had was in regards to just the general lives of the travelers. So like, for example, do they have any pets? Do they have hobbies? Which I did highlight a bit of in the last video, but I'll see if I could make a concrete answer here. And also about little bubs running around, so a little pair of feet running around the home. So that's something that I'll be just divulging a little into. The third question was in regards to Kirishima's video dating advice about whether his traveler and him would end up having like the arcade as a getaway for them after work, after like hero work. But that was 3 questions, yes. Fourth question is about Quirk Malfunctions, as highlighted in Grounding Dragons with Bakugou's traveler Twinkle Toes and gear problems. So if there was anything else highlighted with the other travelers in that regard. And just rounding back to Kirishima's traveler, they had mentioned that they had a headcanon about that traveler listening to music and using music as a way to I guess use their quirk like dance fighting in a sense. They've also mentioned in like line with that about Iida's traveler, if they can come off as defenseless or can't fight until they pull out their hammer, which I had mentioned in the last video, is Big Blue. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but we're gonna get through all of it right now. Firstly, so again, like I mentioned, this is a part 2 since I had to cut it short in the last Q&A video, but after reading what you had mentioned about possibilities with Love's quirk, aka Todoroki's traveler, I started to think that they can't drop someone else's temperature or control their bodies. Their quirk is very much like waterbenders, as mentioned in past videos, but giving them a lot of what waterbenders are capable of doing feels too overpowering in my opinion. Just only having them affect water around them is enough of a quirk. So unlike Todoroki, who could generate ice and fire from his body, his traveler, Love, would not be able to generate water from theirs, which is kind of what Kota's quirk can do. So Kota being the little boy that Midoriya saved when they were out in like the woods. I forgot what arc that was, but Kota can generate water from his hands, whereas the traveler, as in love, cannot. But you know what? Who knows? I know, like I mentioned earlier, they are quite similar to waterbenders. They cannot blood bend, and so that's something I want to debunk right now. Like, they cannot control people like puppets. But the question of super moves was brought up a while ago in a past video. So, and well, Seek had mentioned some cryptic things about love. So who knows, maybe that might change in the future, but for now it's a little too overpowering for them to have that kind of ability. That's in my opinion, really. So the three-parter question, which involves pets, hobbies, and little bubs running around, I guess I'll go from short-term to long-term in that, and we'll start off with pets. So far, the only one with a pet in this universe is Shinsou, and I think I mentioned this in the last Q&A. He has a black cat named Toka, and there's an audio that goes through how he came to have that little bundle with him, so it'll be on screen. I believe it was called A Hero's Example. So far though, no one else has a pet, and I guess it may be that it's never crossed my mind for any of them to have one, especially with all that's going on in their lives right now. So there's a lot of things going on, and I don't know about I kind of understand what you meant about like Sero having a pet fox, because Volpone's a fox, yeah, as in like Tesoro is a fox-like person and everything. But right now I have a good inkling about the plushie that he hangs around there, so it's just, you know, it's just a little bit of memorabilia, I guess, for him to for Sero to as a, I guess, you know, like something for a remembrance thing, so he'll know that Tesoro is always nearby, always there, so that kind of thing. Where was I up to? Oh, I did briefly talk about hobbies in the last video, or in a couple of videos before, but that's something I need to sit and think about still. It's like these kind of things, it's never really crossed my mind about the travelers having like hobbies aside from hero work and everything. Like, I haven't really thought much on that front. But if that is a question that people are interested in, like having a listen and what my thoughts would be like, I will have a think about it and probably answer that in a later video. And finally, just in part of this question, the prospect of little bubs running around, well, there are milestones to make before that happens. But it hadn't stopped me thinking about Kaminari and his traveler having kids that matched Kaminari's chaotic energy. Blame TikTok for that, because there was this one video that just like inspired me to have that image. I don't know, I find it funny. So I had answered this before, and this was about Kirishima's dating advice video. So I wanted to clarify here while I am making time for the question, but the arcade from that video audio may very well be their little getaway from hero work. And Miranda, you also brought a smile to my face when you described Thumper as in Kirishima's traveler, their inclination to music, which I believe had been touched on in the Prom Nightlights reunion video. I'm just extremely happy that that was your headcanon about them like kind of utilizing the music with their quirk, because originally the original quirk idea for Thumper stemmed from a dancer who battled with music. So if anything, this would be Thumper's hobby now that I think about it, which is dancing, but not professional dancing, just like the silly kind of dancing. And you know what? Now that you brought up the arcade, it made me even wonder. It's like, you know, they might play some DDR, as in Dance Dance Revolution, at that arcade. Who knows? And your comment about Iida's traveler, Tinkerbell, yes, that's the nickname that Iida's given his traveler. It's Tinkerbell, short for Tink. It's true that they become useful on the field with the hammer. Hammer being Big Blue. I hope to finish a long-awaited fanfic that will introduce them into the universe, so be sure to keep an eye and an ear out for that one. Now for the doozy of this list of questions, which is the Quirk Malfunctions you've mentioned. So I don't know how to go about this because I wondered if it's the actual Quirk malfunctioning you were meant to talk about, or just the like outside forces malfunctioning, such as Twinkle Toes malfunction were the braces they were wearing, not exactly their quirk. But if we did go through what Twinkle Toes' quirk malfunction is, it's really difficult to say because their quirk kind of is already broken in a way, because they float all the time and they can't turn it off, and they would always have to concentrate in order to plant themselves on the ground. So I actually think Twinkle Toes' quirk is kind of already broken in a way. I don't know how to explain it or describe it, but that's how I feel about it. I'm not sure. But I guess if we're going to go through all of them real quickly, it would stand to reason how the rest would feel if this happened. So Cutie's malfunction, so Cutie being Midoriya's traveler, would be that they couldn't retract their sight back to normal. They'd be in constant magnified vision. Like they no matter where they look, they will not be able to see the full picture of everything. So in a way, they'd be visually impaired. Thumper's would be that they throw their quirk so hard and fast that they dislocate something in their joints. Because like that's their downside. Their joints would always stiffen up. They'd always have to keep moving in order to use their quirk. So I would imagine that they would dislocate, if not break something, if they were to really throw it really hard. I mean, I guess it was Between a Rock and a Hard Place, they explained to Kirishima that they could reach Mach 1. So that's actually really fast, which is faster than Iida and Hawks, but the downside to them is that they can't sustain it for too long and they have to keep moving. Love's malfunction would be, well, basically hypothermia. So how Todoroki can actually suffer from frostbite if he uses ice too much. Love would be that the longer that they stay cold and their body temperature's at a very unhealthy state, the harder for their bodies to retain a normalized temperature. And for all we know, they would actually try so hard not to destroy, I guess, like their body's temperature in that way. Tesora's malfunction would be fainting spells from using their quirk too much. It would almost be starvation. They always need to replenish what they've lost, and pushing themselves would mean starving the body of anything that they could do. So if they were to push too hard and they've not replenished themselves or anything, unfortunately, it's almost like they're gonna starve themselves to death. Kitten's malfunction would be deep diving too far into someone else's mind to the point that it breaks them mentally. So this is really evident in the villain AU. So if anyone's watched The Specialist, everyone would know what Kitten, in that AU they have a different nickname, but that's what would happen to them, I guess, if their quirk had malfunctioned in that way. And Monange's malfunction would be straining the quirk to the point that they could no longer speak, so they would turn mute. So I will not go further with that. That is slightly spoilerish, but hey, one could imagine. Tracy had asked, because of what Seek had mentioned about Sero, they wanted to know if Sero wouldn't be getting, I guess, an audio or a video in the Fantasy AU. And also wondered about Tesoro's quirk a little further, like how far they can throw their light and if they need to be able to see where they're throwing it in order to travel through. So yes, so far Sero doesn't have an existence in the Fantasy AU, but I had juggled ideas on how to fit him into the universe with his traveler. So it may be something in the future, and he would most likely be a side story as opposed to having a timeline in a way, but that's something that I'm just gonna juggle with. Volpone, however I'm going to pronounce it, I'm sorry, Tesoro, as in Sarah's traveler, well, they can only throw their light as far as their strength allows. And yeah, they do need to see where they're thrown. But once they connect with the light, they can then travel with it for as long as they need. The downside being that because it is light, they can only travel where light can. So they can't travel through windows or through walls or anything like that. It has to be like an open, I guess, an open area for them to travel through. Tracy also asked whether the travelers, what their favorite flowers would be. To be honest, I've never really thought about this originally, but I had to think about it after reading your question, Tracy. I mean, after all, Maydays are cherry blossoms, sea lances are Japanese maple, and CQs are lotuses. So if we're gonna go through each of the travelers, including the villains, Cutie's flower would be sunflowers, Twinkle Toes would be dandelions, Thumpers would be gladioluses, Loves would be delphiniums, Kittens would be lavender, Volpone, aka Tesoros, are chamomile, Monange are orchids, Pixies, as in Shigaraki's traveler, are angel's trumpets, Little One, Pipsqueaks, which is Darby's traveler, are hyacinths, and Majors, which is Overhaul's traveler, would be dahlias. So Amari had also asked if Sero and his traveler, again, would be a part of the Fantasy AU. They've also had ideas about Sero being part of the Clan of Knights and traveler would be like a Robin Hood. Also wanting to ask about Kaminari and his traveler, whether Kaminari is a sailor and traveler is a siren, and if Shinsou, and what would Shinsou's traveler be? Firstly, I had thought of Kaminari in the Fantasy AU, however he's part of Midoriya's Fantasy AU timeline as a bard, no less. I'm still in the middle of writing the first chapter of Midoriya's story called Little Red, and with the Fantasy AUs, of which hopefully I can turn into audios, I'll have one-shot side stories, so that may include Kaminari in that regard. I'm not sure about him being, well, again, if he's a bard, he's not really a sailor, but that kind of, I guess, theme will work into where his traveler might be. Sero, on the other hand, like I explained earlier, I haven't thought much about having a Fantasy AU version of him. But now that you've suggested about a Robin Hood of sorts and everything, it had got me thinking, because I did originally plan on Sero's traveler gate crashing in Bakugou's fantasy timeline until I decided to drop the idea. The original intent was that they stole something from Bakugou, so maybe I might rekindle that idea in a different way, who knows, but we'll see how we go. Again, it'll be more of a side story, not a timeline, like I mentioned earlier. But Shinsou's traveler, well, that's a bit of a spoiler. I'm writing 3 different timelines for the Fantasy AU, one being Bakugou as I mentioned, the other Todoroki, and the third being Shinsou. There is a 4th, which is Midoriya, but he's not the same fantasy. That is all I can say. But I will say this about Shinsou's traveler there, Little Lynx, as Seek had already dropped the name, that they are responsible for setting the course for what happens in the fantasy AU. So just to mention a few things, what happens to Midoriya, what happens to the kingdoms, what happens to Todoroki, what happens to a lot of things. And Shinsou is in the middle of all of that as well. So I hope that's enough to satiate the question, because I know if I mention any more, I'm going to spoil a lot of stuff. Sorry. Ashlyn Radio had asked if I preferred Marvel or DC, considering I make a lot of references. Well, yeah, I do. I really enjoy Marvel and DC. I like both, actually, so I guess more so Marvel because it's so huge and big right now. And well, I just recently watched WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, so that kind of helps in that, I guess, creativity and understanding on how like characters can work. But DC is the king of dark themes, especially Batman. Like, I guess Batman's like, well, of course, Batman's been a huge influence in my life growing up, just as much as Spider-Man and Marvel and all of that. And I would imagine that many have noticed that I am a Joker fan, despite how despicable of a human being he is. But that makes him a great villain, in my opinion. And I'm really happy that a lot of people notice the references that I make. So a lot of people, which will be highlighted in the next question, a lot of people had noticed that Iida's villain in The Broker is similar to Joker. People have also noticed, like, for example, Sero's and Tesoro's relationship is very much Black Cat and Spider-Man. So it really, really makes me happy that people are finding these references and these things. So kudos to all of you, I guess. So this brings me back to what I mentioned earlier about this question Amari had asked, that they listened to The Broker again, and they were wondering if Treasure, so that is the nickname in the villain AU for Iida's traveler, if they're scared of Iida because they've sensed the nervous energy around them and it reminded them of how Harley Quinn was afraid of Joker in the cartoons. I would say yes. Treasure is wary and cautious around Iida, but it is very much like Joker and Harley, how they interact with one another. The difference is that Iida isn't just as crazy as Joker. So you see, I do like my DC references, as you can see here. But yeah, definitely there is a Harley Quinn-esque kind of personality that comes out with Treasure. And in a video that I hope to finish, which I mentioned earlier about Iida and Iida's pro hero traveler, that is, the tying between them is definitely baseball referenced, so listen out for that. Lauren Moss had asked where if, I think in the villain AU, why Kirishima and Iida's traveler, along with Sero's traveler that they've added, are the only ones who act, they are willingly turned evil. So I guess because of the universes that I've created here on this channel, I guess in a way that's kind of my headcanon. So if we start with Kirishima, I feel like the traveler there just followed in his footsteps. And earlier I did mention in the pro hero world that they kind of act like a fan, but not really. Like, you know, they're kind of like, they see the higher pro heroes like a role model because they are also like a hero but at a government status. So it's kind of like that adoration for Kirishima that follows through with the villain AU. So that's why they've just kind of followed wherever he went, and they kind of could see what he was seeing as a villain in that regard. Sero's traveler, I just feel like it would work that they were on the same side. Partly because in the Pro Hero, of course, they're a thief. They're not really a villain, but they're not really good either. They're not really a hero either. They're kind of just doing things because they want to do it, and it's what they personally want to do. So with Sero, in his villain AU, Behinho, which is his traveler's nickname there, they kind of just work together, and they're kind of like the power couple. I'm gonna say this, they're the power couple of the villain AU, and it really like makes me feel so much serotonin, haha, that I really like that personally. Iida's traveler though with Treasure in the villain AU, again, it's the kind of, it is like, again, I mentioned it's like the whole Harley Quinn kind of thing. It's like an adoration for the boss, even though they're kind of close to age anyway. They're kind of the same age. He's just a higher rank. But it is like, you know, doing the job well, doing the job right. And that's what Iida's traveler does. And the fact that they're in research and development, and the whole idea that, you know, Iida is trying to be a good citizen that they are, but also like has a hand in the underworld kind of thing, is similar to Todoroki in a way. That I guess it's kind of like having two sides of the same story. So between Todoroki and Iida. So Iida's sense is that he has a traveler that helps him in the underworld and all that, and like, you know, not very quietly, mind you, but does help out and keep him under wraps. Whereas Todoroki's traveler, as people, if you've listened to the audio for his villain story, starts with the Citadel, of course. His traveler's against everything, but trying to actually, you know, I guess convince him from the inside, while still trying to run away from him. So, you know, there's two sides of a different coin, and it's kind of, once, I guess, building up on story and everything between the two, you can see like a reflection between those kinds of dynamics character-wise, and I'm looking forward to doing that between Todoroki and Iida as well. Lauren Moss had also asked, following after this, is if Darby's traveler knows his real name or knows that he's part of the Todoroki family, and when is Shinsou going to pop the question to his traveler? Also adding to that, if digital drawing is easier than drawing on, I guess, on paper. So let's start from the top. Darby's traveler does know his name and his family. It's never been mentioned that they know his name, but I guess Crazy Equals Genius, which is his birthday audio, already highlights the fact that the traveler there, which is Little One and Pipsqueak, know that he's part of the Todoroki family. Actually, if we go back further, Dancer and Prancer also highlights the fact that they already have an inkling and a know, and, you know, acknowledgement that Darby is part of the Todoroki family. But because of the time skip in the storyline, I've not really highlighted how they've come to discover this. So I hope to get around this kind of character development later in videos, in future videos, sorry. So Shinsou's proposal though, well, that's a secret. That's a secret. I'm sorry, I can't divulge anything further. But to answer your question about digital art, I find digital art easier as we're watching this right now on screen, but it's because I've constantly been practicing with a tablet for years. I could draw back on paper, but I think my own patience, if I make a mistake, is just too, I guess, it's just too much. I'm so used to shortcuts like Control-Z for undo and everything, and skewing stuff, that it'll be, I guess it wouldn't be overly difficult, it'll just take so much longer to just draw on paper from here on. That's for me though, personally. Following that question, Samantha had asked, why do they look so good? Where did you learn to draw like that? I have to know. Well, years of slaving away and watching a lot of anime back in the day. There you go, that's my answer. But okay, if I have to go for, I guess, a little more in depth with that, my greatest influences started with shoujo manga such as Fruits Basket and Cardcaptor Sakura, because I just love them to death, and I just love the story and the artwork. And when I read the manga, like, it just influenced me to start drawing kind of in that fashion. I did pick up a manga called Hot Gimmick because of the art originally, and I did learn a lot about, like, I guess, anatomy and how to draw, like, how different ways of drawing faces and everything from that. But in my opinion, even though it influenced my art, the storyline is very questionable. I began hating it. I don't recommend it to anyone unless you absolutely love a female protagonist who is a pushover all the time with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Yeah, so moving on, shonen anime and manga also helped me learn and grow. So my biggest influence was Bleach. I mean, look at these men. Just look at them. They're so beautiful. I just love it. So it's like I kind of gotten a lot of my facial structures and how faces were drawn from that show. But aside from my otaku self enjoying the process of learning, I was also motivated from the start when my mum drew life drawing sketches, like, at home. And then by high school, a friend was a fantastic sketch artist that she was able to draw Final Fantasy characters. Like, beautiful, beautiful faces, and yes, they were absolutely gorgeous, and yes, I was jealous of her talent. So other than that, though, I also read up on artist books like those how-to manga books and brought myself back to basics using shapes and using a mirror to pose and learn how to anatomy. Well, I mean, apparently, as far as the last thing I heard was, the joke now is that I apparently draw pretty decent hands, even though I don't think they're great. But moving on. Just a random Alec. Hi, you've returned once again with more questions about Hanta. Sweet. So you've asked whether Sero Hanta could speak Spanish, considering that he had asked Aoyama for help with the whole nickname thing, and also following the same line, whether the whole Hispanic Hanta ordeal was a thing in this AU on the channel. On top of that, you also wanted to know whether Volpone or else Tesoro could speak Italian, or they just like the ring of it and has decided to just go with the whole Italian thing. Okay, the whole nickname thing, to be frank, was my oversight originally, because trying to be gender neutral with different languages is actually really tricky. Someone had reached out to me suggesting Tesoro as a nickname as it is Italian, considering the original, which was Mio Caro, was unfortunately very male predominant, I guess, and if I last recall. So Tesoro was a good, I guess, middle ground for the name, but I did also pronounce it in pronounce it like it was in Spanish. I don't know, but the fandom headcanon got to me, I think. And I'm trying to keep the Italian headcanon in the Pro Hero AU, while the more Spanish-Portuguese headcanon is more so directed at the villain AU. But to answer your question, sadly, Sero did not come up with the name. It was brainstormed between himself and Aoyama, which will be highlighted in a future video, should I get it, the last segment of it completed. This is also the same video I've mentioned a couple of times earlier in this Q&A, so it's gonna be a big video. So I hope to get it done. Traveler's inclination towards Italian, though, it does explain their favorite foods, which is pasta, their favorite restaurants, which is an Italian restaurant, the way they name things. So yeah, they liked how Italian sounded to them, I guess, but unfortunately they don't speak Italian. They maybe know a few words, but nothing conversational. So really sorry, they're not truly Italian. They're not exactly like Monange. Monange had, I guess, admitted that they did originally come from France. Unfortunately, Volpone is not Italian. Melody Songbird had asked something about Seek's quirk, in that when he uses his quirk on someone and it does that burst of light, it affects other people in the light's burst radius. And if it happened in the dream sequence, do you think it could happen in the real world? I'm going to say, unfortunately, now that I think about it, no. His quirk only affects the person he touches, which has happened in like real life circumstances as well with all the travelers so far in all the Babysitting Duty R videos. So the burst of light is kind of a side effect of the quirk because it shines so brightly that it momentarily blinds those within the vicinity. But because this question was actually posed on the, I guess, the Shinsou's Babysitting Duty video, I just like to say, because basically what was happening in that beginning sequence was that Kitten, Shinsou's traveler, was just watching what was going on in Kaminari's timeline, which is basically Kaminari's Babysitting Duty art video. So it's like she was kind of the passenger in Seek's head watching everything unfold. No, the burst of light is just a side effect of his quirk. Of Seek's quirk, that is, and all he ever the only thing that he affects is just basically the well, in this case the traveler, but he just affects the person he touches when he uses his quirk, and that's about it. But you have added further questions on top of this, because you were wondering, how is Traveler seeing Seek's actions through his eyes? Is it with the quirk? How does Seek know about this when he said, "I know you're watching, so wake up"? Also adding on to that, you've mentioned about him, Seek, mentioning you've shown it in another time, but you were long gone, and that he referencing the villain AU. So firstly, I will say, yes, when Seek had said that to Kitten, showing a lesser mental fortitude, he was definitely referring to the villain AU. He was referring to, of course, him knowing Kitten in the villain AU and seen what had happened to them there. But to answer your other question about travelers seeing Seek's actions through their eyes, to answer that connection, I will say briefly that the only reason that they could is because Traveler had deep dived a little too far into Seek's head when they were interrogating him, and that kind of made that connection with them. So if you've gone back to Between You and Me when they were being interrogated, the last thing that they did was Seek explaining to them something extremely cryptic about what he was doing, and then severing the connection between him and Traveler. And I don't know if people have noticed, but really what happened during that time was that the Traveler, as in Kitten, didn't sever it, Seek did. So Kitten had no control over when to, I guess in a way, unlock themselves away from Seek's head. Seek did it for them. And in a way that unfortunately did cause this mental connection that in the Shinsou's Babysitting Duty it's been briefly explained that they were able to see his movements, they were able to see everything that he did, They were able to, I guess in a way, they were able to inform people about where he was going and where he was in the city. So listening back to, I guess, like, you know, Bakugou and Kirishima's one, which is like they're on the same day, Todoroki and Midoriya's, which was also on the same day, is that the part of the town was actually evacuated or told to stay indoors before, like, you know, chasing after this one man that they've unfortunately, like, couldn't apprehend. So the only reason they could do that is if they knew he was around the area, and that was because Kitten was able to hold onto that connection during the, I guess, in the time frame wise, during the month that he was causing and wreaking havoc. But if anyone wants to know further, I guess, theories about it, I've pinned a very lengthy theory time comment on Shinsou's babysitting duty R video. I think it was written by, I think the username was aha or like it'll be up briefly on the screen, but it's a very lengthy comment. I suggest head on over to that video so you can read the pinned comment, because it really hit the nail on the head about a lot of things between the Kitten's Traveler and Seek that I'm almost extremely proud. It definitely impressed me when I read it, and I was like, I'm so proud of you. That's how I felt for that. So for those interested in reading it up, please head on over to that video. Anyone, I assume, who has written down like comments or leads, or I guess like notes, like I think I read somewhere briefly that a lot of you have started, maybe not a lot of you, I'd say a few of you have started putting a notebook together about these different things, about how people are connected to one another and all that. That comment should help out a little bit more. And again, I am just extremely proud of that person. It just kind of, I don't know, I just feel so happy that a lot of you are like connecting things together, and the fact that a lot of you are asking these questions about like their lives and about just this, I guess it's this keen interest in them, that it just really helps me out, so like I guess creatively to think I guess a lot more layers to their characters, and I really enjoy that so much. I'm just more than happy that a lot of you are enjoying the content that's being put out, but also that I'm enjoying the process myself. Whew, I guess that's all the questions we have. I've gone through everything and it's almost 45 minutes, thank goodness. So anyhow, it's been amazing to hear what you guys are interested or keen to like learn more about. I will see if I can get into creating more content, whether from developing the AUs here or even bringing in a different kind of fandom, which will actually bring a lot more, I guess, lore-induced questions and answers for you. Maybe not. Maybe they might just be very light ones. Who knows? But thank you so much. Remember, #MayIAsk in the comments down below if you'd like to ask any further questions, whether it's about art, whether it's about the channel, or whether it's about like any lore questions or even other fandom questions. I am happy to answer as best I can. But see you soon, and keep asking.